and eating small frequent meals, 4 to 6 a day, possibly even more if you count every single time that I'm putting something in my mouth. A lot of times I do not actually feel any hunger pains. I just kind of mentally feel them in my brain, or I just want to eat something, but I don't necessarily feel like I need to eat it. So that intuitive eating style is something that I personally am working on actively every single day and asking myself, am I really hungry? Most of the times I'm thirsty. And for me personally, thirst always makes me feel like I want to grab food, especially something carbohydrate. I don't know why that is. So let's talk about heart disease a little bit. The very reason why the powers that be told us to eat their nutritional guidelines was to prevent heart disease, right? The low fat heart disease. Well, people that participated for many, many years and educated people, number one, low fat diets were just hard to stick with. They are not fun. They are not fun. Every time I hear somebody say rice cake, I just want to, or see them eat it, I just want to slap it right out of your hands. Like, don't even waste your chewing power on that thing. You know, low fat is definitely typically a temporary solution, which often has temporary results. People that consume low fat diets typically have low energy, trouble concentrating, they suffer from depression, they gain weight. And you've seen it. You've probably actually experienced it. You lose it and you gain it right back. And what does everybody say? And then some. And then, of course, the low fat, low calorie, low cholesterol dieters, they often have, almost like 99% of the time, mineral deficiencies. They're not getting those vitamin A, D, E, and K, and a host of others that I had mentioned earlier. Can I give you a little shocking report here? Before 1920, heart disease was actually rare. Can you even imagine that? I can't tell you how many times before I knew what I know now and continue to learn now, how many times I would eye roll or give those wifely looks, I'm pretty sure that's not a word, at my husband, because I always said he would butter if he could, right? And I was definitely hand in the air or on my heart or in the air and on my heart. I bought Smart Beat, Smart Balance for a time, thinking that well, if my husband's going to eat butter, I don't want him to have a heart attack. We're only in our 20s. I need to buy that. And or Country Crock or I can't believe it's not butter. I never bought that one. My mom was pretty bright. She was pretty bright. I think she tried she could tell you, the margarine route just for a short time, and her spidey sense says, nah. Now we know that it's full of hydrogenated oils, and at some point we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about cholesterol. And it's not too far removed from plastic, and she didn't have it a part of our home when we were growing up. But when I became, the adult that knows better, I was quick to jump on board thinking that I was saving my husband from heart disease, which we now know is not true at all. As a matter of fact, some recent research that was done compared men that eat butter to men that ate margarine. And actually, the men that ate the butter ran half the risk of developing heart disease. How crazy is that? Now, there's many factors that go into research. And a little bit down the road, we're going to talk about that, the types of research that I like to look into, meta-analysis, which is really looking at all kinds of research and then researching the research to get some better numbers, because research is definitely easy to manipulate. So anytime I give you tips or facts or statistics or talk about quote unquote research that is being done, the mentors and educators and teachers and scientists that I follow and listen to, they also are very careful with the research that they're studying to make sure that they're getting the truest answers for all of us. Let's talk a little bit about mother's milk. I know I breastfed our 3 sons. I went about 13 months long on each one. I was well aware that that was the absolute best food for them. And one of the reasons why mother's milk is so good is because it is really high in fat, saturated fat. At 50%, it's 50% cholesterol, or it's highest in cholesterol, and it's 50% saturated fat. And it helps those babies' brains develop, which is super excited. One of my sons, they're already trying for number 2, and we couldn't be happier. And this is one of the many, many reasons why I'm so proud of these beautiful women, inside and out, that our older sons have chosen to spend the rest of their lives with. They are not listening to those powers that be. They are educating themselves, because I tell you what, thank goodness. If their pediatricians are listening to the power it be, and I'll tell you, I know that they are, they would be listening to the American Heart Association, which is right now encouraging pediatricians to tell mothers, make sure that your kids are eating low-fat, low cholesterol diets. Oh my gosh. Now this podcast today is not on brain development, but I just mentioned earlier how vital fat is for healthy brain development. And at no other time during our life, but those first 5 years, our brain is growing crazy and developing crazy. And then it starts to really slow down. So let's take advantage. So tell yourself, if you're still having babies, tell your girlfriends, tell your daughters, tell your granddaughters, breastfeed, man, if you can. There are medical reasons why some women just can't breastfeed, and my heart goes out to them. But there are other alternatives where you don't have to necessarily buy, some of the formulas that the companies are repping at the hospital. You can find a more natural alternative, and even people are making their own formulas for babies. That's a whole other topic that hopefully someday I will get to. But let's look, who are the best people in the world? Who eats the highest amount of fats, yet they are showing via research here to have the lowest levels of heart disease? The Japanese, the Swiss, and I know you know this one, French. Those skinny French women that smoke cigarettes and eat croissants and cheese and heavy cream and all of that stuff, yet they have the lowest rates of heart disease. What? Now it is starting to creep up, especially in France, with more and more pressure. I don't know what the pressure is about, if it's exploding population, if it's just budgetary, but they're using more and more refined flours and processed, more like the flours that we're using here in the States. So I hope they swing that back around. What we have really found to be the culprit in heart disease is sugar. Excess sugar, any food that contains carbohydrates, whether it is a peach or even broccoli has like a little tiny bit, of sugar in it. But I'm mostly talking about refined sugar that you find like in white flour products. That's the culprit. That's the culprit for heart disease. And you can talk to any diabetic, about their conversations that their doctors give them in pre-diabetes about the risk of sugar. Yet, they do steer them towards the American Diabetic Association's website, which still touts the grains and too much fruit, too much grains, too much fruit. And they're just really pushing these poor people towards heart risk, a heart attack risk. So that makes me very, very sad. Let's talk a little bit about fats. So we break down fats into 3 categories: saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated fats. Let's break them down a little bit further, and I'll kind of very briefly define them. Saturated fats are typically going to be solid. I think of my coconut oil, solid. They come from animal fats, as well as tropical oils like my coconut oil. But my body can also make saturated fats. They're highly stable, which means that they have a low risk of cancer. I'm going to move on to monounsaturated fats. Our bodies do make them from saturated fats. They're capable of making their own. And they're typically liquid at room temperature. They're fairly stable. They don't go rancid very easily, and that's why we use them in cooking. Some examples of monounsaturated fats would be olive oils, pecans, cashews, peanuts, avocados themselves, and avocado oils, right? So those are our monounsaturated fats. And then polyunsaturated fats, they're comprised of omega-6s and omega-3s. Now, our body cannot make these. That's why we call them essential fatty acids. And we need to get these from foods. So we talk about, eat your salmon or eat your tuna, get your omegas or your krill or your omega-3 pills. That's why we do that. We must get them from food. They remain a liquid even in the refrigerator, and they're highly reactive. So we don't cook with them. They're not very stable. They go rancid very easily, especially omega-3s go rancid very easily. And I'm going to say it again. We do not cook with we should not cook with polyunsaturated fats. So now that we understand there's saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and polyunsaturated fats, we classify them again. The fatty acids are short, medium, long, and very long chains. And I know with fat coffees being kind of a trending thing right now, I know I love my fat coffee. We know short chain, medium chain, long chain, very long chains. So when people make a fat coffee, typically they will use an MCT oil in it, or a medium chain triglyceride or fat. So let's talk about these categories a little bit. Short chains, these are always from saturated fat. They're mostly found in butterfat from cows or goats. And a little side note here, whenever I am referring to cows or goats or even poultry or what have you, I'm referring to the absolute best possible food for those animals. And for cows, that would be grass, no grain. Everything that I'm going to talk to you about quality that is found in the products, the animals themselves, if you're eating the meat, or if you are consuming like the buttercream from the cow or the milk from the cow, this is assuming that this is a grass-fed cow. No, not a grain finish. That's a whole other conversation because we are what we eat. So if the cow is eating crappy, then everything about the cow is going to be crappy. That's just my classy way of breaking that down. Okay, so back to short chain fatty acids, always from saturated fats, mostly from butterfat from cows and goats. We do absorb short chain fatty acids very quickly and easily, and they're less likely to cause weight gain than something like olive oil, and they do contribute to a healthy immune system. So even though I do eat just small amounts of dairy, when I say that I eat small amounts of dairy, that small amount would be butter. For example, today I had an almond flour waffle, and I had two of them actually, and I was very hungry post yoga today, and so it was kind of a more challenging session, and I know I have a lot to do today with my brain, and so I put 2 tablespoons of my grass-fed butter on my almond flour waffles, and I happen to buy the Kerrygold, and I absolutely love it. I believe it comes in a tub, it comes in a stick, it comes in a brick. It's absolutely wonderful. But it does give you that nice, quick energy. And I do like that, knowing that it is also helping with my immune system, since I have fibromyalgia and chronic pain and chronic fatigue. Now let's get to the fat coffees, the medium chain triglycerides, right? They're mostly found in butterfat. They're also found in tropical oils, like I talked about, the coconut oil. And macadamia is another, I believe, considered to be a tropical oil. They also give you quick energy and are very healthy for your immune system. So there's all kinds of different MCT options out there. There's a lot of talk about keto and exogenous ketones and our own ketone manufacturing abilities. And, sometimes I use just regular old coconut oil in my fat coffees. Sometimes I use ghee, sometimes I use butter, sometimes I really like the Bulletproof brand. It's more of a refined medium chain triglyceride